Sunday afternoon. Maya's apartment in Chicago. Fourth floor, Wicker Park. The windows faced west, and at 3 o'clock, the October light came in flat and gold. The way it only does in fall. Like the city was trying to show her something and wouldn't be able to show her much longer. She was at the kitchen counter with her laptop open, a glass of wine she hadn't touched, and her phone pressed to her ear. Nadia had asked how things were going with Connor.
I mean, good. Really good. Like, genuinely.
She laughed a little when she said it. A nervous laugh. The kind that appeared when she was saying something true but wasn't sure she had permission to believe it yet.
He said exactly what I'd always wanted to hear. I know how that sounds, but I mean it literally. Not like a figure of speech. It's like he knew.
Nadia made the sound she made when she was listening carefully. Maya knew that sound. They'd been friends since grad school. Through her divorce, through the years of rebuilding, Nadia had been there for the hard version of Maya. She'd earned the right to hear the good version.
He remembered that I hate cilantro. From, like, our second date. He picks restaurants now where I don't have to ask. Last Saturday, we went to this place in River North, and when we sat down, he said, just offhandedly, I checked the menu already. You're safe. I don't know. Is that ridiculous?
It's not ridiculous, Nadia said. It's nice. He pays attention.
He does. He pays attention to everything.
The afternoon light slid a little. A cloud somewhere west of the city.
And it's weird. It's like we think the same way. About almost everything. Books, where we want to be in 5 years. The way we feel about big cities. I keep waiting to find the thing we disagree about, and then I don't.
That's amazing, Nadia said. That's actually amazing. You sound happy. Maya looked out at the gold light.
I am. I think I am.
She said it with a small uncertainty. The kind that sounds like gratitude, but has a question underneath it. Like she was testing the word before she let herself use it. She didn't tell Nadia about the other thing. The small thing. The thing that didn't have a name. She was a senior financial analyst at a consulting firm in the Loop. She'd been there 6 years, built her reputation on risk assessment, reading the patterns beneath the surface of numbers, finding the variable that looked stable but wasn't, asking the question that made a deal look different. She was good at it. Her clients paid for the version of her that didn't get fooled by a clean projection. She was 35. She had 1 failed marriage behind her and 2 years of being careful. Careful with money, careful with time, careful with who she let in. Connor had met her at a work event in July, a conference she'd almost canceled on. They'd ended up at the same table at a dinner that went 3 hours longer than anyone expected, and he'd spent most of it asking her questions. Not flirting, asking. About her work, about the book she was reading, about what she thought about a particular theory in behavioral economics. He was a strategic consultant. He traveled. He talked easily about everything and revealed, she noticed later, very little. On their 4th date, she'd said something that had been on her mind for weeks, something about the distance she'd felt still, even after her divorce. The sense that she'd spent 10 years trying to be the right version of herself for someone else and had come out the other side not entirely sure who the original version was. Connor had looked at her across the table with an expression she had never quite been able to classify. Not pity, not absorption. something more specific.
That's the thing about you. You see patterns everywhere. You're the most honest person in the room about the things other people would rather not look at.
She'd felt something open in her chest. She was not, as a rule, the kind of person who got floored by a compliment. She'd been complimented. She knew what that felt like, the small, warm moment, and then the returning to herself. This felt different. It felt like being seen. She would think about that feeling later, how convincing it was. 3 months in, things were still good, objectively good. Every metric she could apply. He called when he said he'd call. He showed up when he said he'd show up. He remembered the name of her mother's cat, the name of the colleague she complained about twice, the title of the paper she'd mentioned offhandedly in their first week. She had a spreadsheet of the year's financial risk assessments on her second monitor and a boyfriend who knew she drank her coffee black except on Sundays, when she wanted it with oat milk because Sunday was different. He'd bought a carton of oat milk for his refrigerator 3 weeks into the relationship. She was not the kind of person who needed to be impressed by gestures. She noticed them anyway. But the small thing was still there. Quiet, recurrent, like a number in a column that didn't quite balance. She told herself it was her. She was the one who'd spent a decade being told her instincts were wrong, who'd come out of her marriage carrying a fine layer of doubt over every feeling she had. She was the one who had built a professional life on skepticism and had to remember daily that professional skepticism wasn't the same as personal fear. She was the one who kept the 2 meters running simultaneously and couldn't always tell which reading was which. It was her. Obviously, it was her. A woman with her history and her first serious relationship since feeling small, unnamed discomforts was not a mystery. It was exactly what it looked like. She poured a glass of water and told herself to enjoy it. She almost did. They were in a bookstore on a Saturday in August, one of the independent ones on Milwaukee Avenue that had been there 20 years, the kind where the staff recommendations cards were handwritten and actually worth reading. Connor had picked up a book from a display table. He turned it over, read the back.
Oh, I love this one. Actually, I think this might be my favorite book. Have had it for as long as I can remember.
Maya looked at the cover. She recognized it immediately. It was the book she had described to him on their first date. She told him about it in specific terms, when she'd first read it, what it had shifted in her, that she came back to certain passages every time she was reconfiguring something in her life. She'd called it the one that changed how I think. She stood in the bookstore and looked at the cover and waited for something to clarify. She had 2 possible interpretations. The first was that it was an extraordinary coincidence, that they had independently the same formative book. The world was full of these coincidences. The second was that he had heard her describe it as her most important book and had since made it his. She didn't know which was true. She had no way of knowing. She thought, people share favorite books. This happens.
You've read it, right? You'd mentioned it.
Yeah. First date.
Right. I should have connected that. Small world.
He smiled. She smiled. They bought 2 other books and walked to the coffee shop next door and talked for 2 hours about things she couldn't remember afterward. Later, in the car, she sat for a moment before turning the key. She kept running the numbers. She kept coming up with 2 possible answers and no way to choose between them. She started the car, drove home. She would not let herself become the kind of woman who ruined good things with bad math. She made an appointment with Dr. Shaw in September. She hadn't seen a therapist since the end of her marriage, when she'd spent 2 years untangling the specific way she'd accepted a version of herself that didn't fit. She'd done good work then. She thought she was done. She wasn't exactly sure what she was coming for this time. She said that sitting down,
I'm not sure what I'm here for. That might be a red flag about me as a patient.
Why a red flag?
I'm a data person. I like clear problem statements.
What would the clearest possible problem statement be?
Maya thought about it.
I'm in a relationship that looks perfect by every measure I can apply, and I feel very quietly like something is slightly off. And I don't trust that feeling because I have a history of not trusting the right things.
That's a clear enough statement.
Is it?
You said 3 things. The relationship looks good, something feels off, and you don't know which of those to trust. That's precise.
Maya looked at her.
I've been telling myself it's my training. At work, I look for the thing that's wrong in a situation that looks fine. I might be doing that here. I might be pathologizing something that's just good.
Tell me about the relationship.
Maya told her Connor 3 months, what it felt like, the oat milk, the restaurant menus, the way he asked questions, the extraordinary alignment, the way she'd felt seen on that 4th date.
You used that word twice. Seen.
Yeah,
What does being seen feel like?
like someone else confirming that the way you experience yourself is real. That you're not the only one who knows who you are.
And Connor gives you that.
He gives me the feeling of it. Yes.
I want to stay with that distinction for a second. The feeling of it.
Maya was quiet.
You mentioned he agrees with you about things, books, the future, how you feel about the city.
He does.
Has he ever disagreed with you? About something real?
Maya opened her mouth and closed it.
I mean, we have different preferences sometimes. He likes different music than I do.
Music preferences aren't opinions. Has he held a strong view about something that conflicted with yours?
Maya was quiet again. She was thinking.
He thinks differently than I do about investment strategies, maybe. Professionally.
Maybe.
It hasn't come up that specifically. We don't tend to argue. I've thought that was a good sign.
What would it mean if the absence of conflict wasn't a sign that you agreed, but that he was tracking your positions carefully enough to stay out of conflict?
Maya looked at her.
That's a significant question.
You mentioned he said you were the most honest person in the room about things other people would rather not look at. That's a precise compliment.
It felt very specific to me.
Why do you think it felt specific?
Maya paused.
Because I'd been telling him about my divorce. About the way I felt like I'd spent years being a version of myself that didn't fit. About feeling like I'd lost some original version of myself in there.
So you gave him the thing you most needed to be seen for.
And he named it.
And he named it.
The room was very quiet for a moment.
I'm not asking you to draw a conclusion today, but I want you to sit with a question. Not to answer it yet. Just to carry it. When you feel seen by Connor, can you tell me what he sees?
What do you mean?
You've described a man who pays extraordinary attention, who remembers everything, who agrees with your positions and reflects your preferences back to you in the form of gestures. What I'm asking is, what does he volunteer? What do you know about who Connor is, separate from who you are?
Maya sat with that. The session ended 15 minutes later. She drove home in the autumn dark, thinking about the question and coming up with answers that turned, as she examined them, slightly transparent. October. A Tuesday evening. She was at Connor's apartment. He'd cooked. He was a good cook. He'd learned from his grandmother, he said, and the detail felt real in the way details feel when they're actually true. She appreciated when things felt true. They were at the table finishing a bottle of wine, and she was telling him about a deal she'd been working on. A client in Minneapolis who was being optimistic about a commercial real estate acquisition. She was skeptical. The numbers were clean enough, but she'd seen that kind of clean before. The kind that comes from choosing which numbers to show.
The projection assumes an occupancy rate that's based on a market that looked like this 2 years ago. The market doesn't look like that now. They're extrapolating from data that's already outdated.
Connor nodded.
The thing is, optimism has its own market logic. Sometimes, if enough people believe a projection is achievable, it becomes partially self-fulfilling. The deal looks good because people are acting as if it looks good.
Maya looked at him.
That's not wrong, but it doesn't actually change the underlying risk.
No, I know. I'm just saying the social reality is part of the analysis.
I mean, the way I'd frame it is...
She stopped. Connor had just restated her own framing from 2 weeks ago. She had used those exact words. Social reality is part of the analysis, in a conversation with him about a different deal. She remembered it precisely because she'd been proud of the formulation. He was saying it back to her now as a response to her concern, as his insight. She looked at him across the table. He was pouring the last of the wine, unhurried. He said exactly what I'd always wanted to hear. The phrase moved through her differently than it had on the phone with Nadia in October. Not as gratitude, as something else. A key turning in a lock she hadn't known was there.
Great. Yeah.
She picked up her glass. He was talking about something else now. A client he'd seen that afternoon. She listened and nodded and held the wine she wasn't drinking and turned the phrase over in her head until the evening ended. She was back in Dr. Shaw's office in November. She had something specific to bring this time.
He described a book as his favorite last month. It was the book I described to him on our first date as the most significant book I've ever read. He said he'd had it for as long as he can remember.
How did that land?
I told myself it was a coincidence. That people share formative books. I've been telling myself that for 3 weeks. But last week he said something in a conversation that was... It was my formulation. Word for word. Something I'd said to him 2 weeks ago about analyzing market perception. He said it as if he was adding something, and it was just mine. It was just me coming back.
What did you do?
Said right and changed the subject. I didn't want to make it into a thing.
Why not?
Because I might be wrong. Because I might be doing the thing where I find patterns that aren't there.
You spend your professional life finding patterns that are there when they look like they're not. That's what you're paid for.
I know.
Maya, I want to ask you something, and I need you to sit with it before you answer. In 3 months of dating Connor, how many times has he held a strong opinion that you didn't already hold first?
Maya started to answer. Stop. She thought about the first date, the fourth date, the bookstore Saturday, the dinner last week. She tried to locate a moment when Connor had pushed back on something, when he'd arrived at an opinion and she'd had to catch up, when the conversation had moved in the direction he'd chosen rather than one she'd established. She ran the search the way she'd run a dataset query, looking for a specific variable. She couldn't find one.
The lie isn't a single sentence, Maya. It's a persona. Built from your blueprint. You showed him what you needed, and how you talked about your past, what you lit up over, what you went quiet about, and he became it. Not because he loves you, because he doesn't have anything else to be.
Maya looked at her.
So what was I in love with?
Jung called it the Anima projection. When we fall for someone new, we don't yet know who they are. So we project onto them the image of what we most need them to be, the ideal we've been carrying, the deepest version of what we think love looks like.
I wasn't seeing him. I was seeing a reflection.
He didn't create the projection. He detected it. He became the container for it. You showed him what you most needed to be seen for. Your analysis, your honesty, your difficulty trusting after what you'd been through. And he became the person who saw all of that. Exactly.
That should be harder than it sounds.
It is for most people. Narcissistic mirroring requires extraordinary attentiveness. He pays attention in ways that feel like love because they look like love. The difference is what's underneath. Genuine intimacy requires a self, someone who is actually there when the mirroring stops. What you're describing is a person who cannot stop mirroring because there is no self to return to when the performance ends. He said I was the most honest person in the room about things other people would rather not look at.
And what does that tell you about how he knew what you always wanted to hear?
Maya sat with that. You told him. You handed him the blueprint in the first 6 weeks. Every fear, every longing, every place the marriage had damaged you. You gave him the map, and he became the territory. She felt a very specific kind of cold, not fear, not grief. Something more precise than either of those.
I wasn't being seen. I was being used as a source material.
Not used. That implies malice. What you're describing is someone who genuinely cannot connect any other way. The self underneath the mirroring isn't evil. It's empty. He mirrors because without it, there's nothing there to offer. This is painful for different reasons.
Because I can't be angry at him.
You can be angry. You're allowed to be angry. What you're saying is that you can't simplify it.
Maya looked out the window of the office, a gray November afternoon, trees stripped bare.
I keep thinking about the night I told him about my divorce. About how I'd spent 10 years becoming someone I didn't recognize. I told him the thing I'd never told anyone the way I told him.
And he became the person who could finally receive that.
And I thought it was love. I thought, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Somebody actually knowing you.
What you felt was real. The projection was real. The need it came from was real. What wasn't real was the person on the other side of it.
Maya was quiet for a long time.
So the moment I felt most loved, the 4th date, when he said he saw me, that was the most constructed moment.
The most carefully assembled. Yes.
Maya exhaled.
He said exactly what I'd always wanted to hear.
She said it quietly, not to Dr. Shaw, almost to herself. The phrase had traveled a long way since she'd said it to Nadia with a smile. It had passed through gratitude, through strangeness, through something that felt like recognition and then felt like something darker. And now, it sat differently in her mouth, not as a testimony to the relationship, but as a question about it. The most honest assessment she'd made so far.
What do you want to do with what you know?
I don't know yet. I need to sit with it.
That's the right answer.
I'm supposed to see him tonight.
You don't have to decide anything tonight. What would you need to notice?
Maya thought.
Whether he volunteers something, whether anything he says comes from him rather than from me.
That's a good thing to look for.
She met Connor at a restaurant in the West Loop that evening. He'd picked it. He texted that morning. Made a reservation somewhere I think you'll like. Quiet but not precious. You can actually talk. She'd read the text and thought, he picked this for what he thinks I want. She was noticing differently now, not anxiously, clinically. He was already at the table when she arrived. He stood when he saw her. He was good at this. The small social gestures that read as attentiveness. He had a warm smile, the kind that moved his eyes.
You look tired.
Long afternoon.
He asked how it went. She told him, briefly, about a meeting. He listened, nodded at the right places, asked a question that landed in exactly the gap she'd left in the explanation. She looked at him across the table and tried to see behind the attentiveness, tried to locate the self that was paying attention. He was telling her about a client now, a company in Denver. He was helping restructure their strategy. He described it well, clear, interesting, the kind of story she usually enjoyed. Because bara lad the changet to being per bill for the storage and I bleeds it said forning tabunin that it all pausen die to take the moment. And es go tro digging per bell cage man bide guni bara scott tamas quad away. He's sably say throw. The port to Delhi. He's tros and ja. So to be halbu the two conset bo, the stapelits rebelli dan not. He described the situation. He described the challenge. He described what he was recommending. She realized, listening, that she was hearing a very good account of the situation with no Connor in it. What he was recommending was technically sound. She could not tell whether he believed it or had assessed that it was the answer the client needed to hear. She thought about the financial analyst in her, who looked at a presentation and thought, this is either someone who truly believes this projection or someone who's very good at presenting it. The result looks the same from outside.
Anyway, how are you feeling about the Minneapolis deal?
Skeptical. Same as before.
You're usually right when you're skeptical.
He said it simply, like a fact, like something he'd observed over time and arrived at independently. She looked at him. He said exactly what I'd always wanted to hear. The phrase arrived in her chest with a quiet horror, not dramatic, not cinematic. The way a number in a spreadsheet goes red when a threshold is crossed. A small signal, precise, impossible to unsee.
What do you think I should do with it?
I think you should trust your read. You always know before you know.
She looked at him. He was watching her with the warm, attentive expression she had learned to interpret as understanding. She was beginning to understand that she had been misreading what it was attentive to. She didn't break up with him that week. She observed. She began to do with Connor what she did at work. Systematic documentation. Not written. She didn't write it down, but she noticed she kept a running internal account. The things he volunteered, few. The opinions he arrived at without prompting, nearly none. The preferences he expressed that did not, when she traced them, trace back to something she had said first. She could count them on one hand after 2 weeks of careful attention. He had told her he loved jazz. She traced it. She had mentioned Miles Davis in their third conversation. He had said he preferred weekends in the city to travel. She traced it. She had said in October that she needed more time at home and less movement. He had described his approach to his work as thinking about the gap between what a system claims it's doing and what it's actually doing. She traced it. She had used nearly that exact phrasing to describe her own approach in their second month, during a conversation about professional philosophy. She sat with what she was finding. She had assumed for 3 months that the extraordinary alignment between them was evidence of compatibility. She was now understanding it as evidence of something else entirely. That was not love. She wasn't sure what it was, but she was very sure. With the precision she applied to things, she was very sure of that it was not love. She went back to Dr. Shaw 2 weeks later. She was calmer now. Or a different kind of calm. Not suppressed, just settled. The kind that comes when you've finished gathering the data and before you've decided what to do with it.
I've been documenting. Informally.
What did you find? Everything that he appears to think, prefer, or value can be traced to something I said first. It's not a large data set, 3 months. But the pattern is complete. There are no exceptions.
What does that tell you?
That I've been in a hall of mirrors. That what I thought was understanding was echo. That I gave him every piece of information he needed to become what I needed him to be, and he used it. Not because he wanted to trick me, but because he doesn't have a self that could do anything else.
How do you feel about that?
Maya was quiet for a moment.
I feel grief, which is strange because the relationship still exists. He's still there.
What are you grieving?
The version of the relationship I thought I had. I'm grieving the 4 months when I thought I was finally being known.
That grief is legitimate. The connection you felt was real. You just understand now what it was made of.
And there's also something that feels like relief. Which I didn't expect.
Why relief? Because I wasn't broken. The whole time I've been wondering if it was me, if my instinct was wrong, if my skepticism was damage, if I was the problem. And I wasn't wrong. Something was off. The something was real.
Your body knew.
My body knew weeks before I could name it. I just kept explaining it away.
You also need to be gentle with yourself about that. What you're describing, a mirror that perfectly reflects what you need, is not easy to see through. The reason it works is because what you feel when you're in it is completely real. The warmth you felt is real. The sense of being understood is real as an experience. The projection was real. What wasn't real was the person on the other side of the glass.
I was in love with the best version of myself, reflected back.
And you deserve someone who makes you feel that way because they actually know you. Not because they've studied how to appear to.
Maya sat with that for a long moment.
How do you grieve something that isn't over yet?
By knowing what you know and letting yourself know it. The relationship doesn't have to end tonight for the grief to start being real. You can hold the truth and the relationship at the same time for a while. You don't have to rush to a decision just because you've reached a clarity.
But I can't unknow it.
No, you can't.
She had dinner with Connor that Friday. A place he'd chosen in River North. Quiet, precise. The kind of restaurant where the lighting was always exactly right. He checked the menu in advance. She knew this because he texted to confirm she didn't have a cilantro problem with the dish he was going to suggest. She sat across from him and watched him be Connor. He was good at it. She gave him that, honestly. He was one of the most attentive people she had ever met. He remembered everything. He responded to everything. He reflected everything back with such warmth and precision that the warmth felt authentic, even now that she understood its source. She thought about what Dr. Shaw had said. There is no Connor to return to when the performance ends. The mirror is not a strategy. It is the only way he knows how to exist in relation to someone else. She didn't know whether to feel sad for him or simply to understand. She chose to understand.
You're quiet tonight.
I'm thinking.
Work?
Something like that.
He reached across the table, covered her hand with his. The gesture was warm. It was exactly the gesture she would have needed in this moment if she hadn't known what she now knew. She looked at his hand on hers. She thought, he's reading something. He's read that I'm withdrawn, and he's offering the gesture most likely to bring me back. She let her hand stay where it was.
Whatever you're working through, you'll figure it out. You always do.
Yeah.
He said exactly what I'd always wanted to hear. She thought it without bitterness. Just observation. A number in a column entering the record. She smiled, said thank you. The evening continued. She ended it the following Sunday. She thought about how to do it. She wasn't afraid of the conversation. She had managed difficult conversations before, professionally and personally. She knew how to say a true thing clearly. She met him at his apartment. He made tea. She sat at the kitchen table.
I need to tell you something, and I want to say it clearly.
He looked at her.
I've been noticing something over the past few weeks, and I need to be honest with you about it. The way I try to be honest about things I see clearly.
A four for you. Crowley Bailey. Not, Bailey Bashpeep, the Pain and Malleodor, and the attic like to be that for the done case. The playing fights the spudgically soaring vetations of free game. And vedondi talkway. But man, she told home and Harning in that can one night. And he said not KP Das died, is going to side pay. He listened. His expression moved through several things. Concern, a trace of withdrawal, and then something she recognized from the pattern she'd been building, a careful assembly of the right response.
I think you might be... I'm worried you're applying your work mindset to this. Not everything is a data problem. Some things are just feelings.
She looked at him. He'd just given her back her own language from 6 weeks ago. The worry she'd expressed to Dr. Shaw that she was applying her analytical training where it didn't belong. He had absorbed that and was now using it as a defense. She felt a complicated thing. The recognition was almost elegant. Almost.
I hear that, and I've sat with it. I'm not ending this because I'm afraid. I'm ending it because I know what I know.
He was quiet. For a moment, she thought she saw something beneath the composure. Not emotion exactly. The particular quality of a space where emotion should be and isn't.
I don't. I'm not sure what you want me to say.
You don't have to say anything. I just wanted to say it honestly.
She left 20 minutes later. Walking down the stairs, she waited to feel something acute. What she felt instead was the slow arrival of something simpler, the specific relief of a woman who had trusted her own analysis. December, Chicago at its coldest, the kind of week where the city feels stripped down to what it actually is, gray and permanent and, in its own way, honest about itself. Maya was at her desk on a Thursday evening, late, the loop mostly empty outside. She was finishing the Minneapolis report, the one she'd been skeptical about for 2 months. She had written the conclusion 3 times. She had kept softening it, and kept going back and sharpening it again, until it finally said what she had known it said since October. The risk here is not what it appears to be. The projection assumes a market that no longer exists, recommending against. She read it once more. She hit send. She sat back in her chair and looked at the window in the dark city outside it. Streetlights on the wet pavement, the particular Chicago night that always felt like a city trying to remember why it was worth the cold. She thought about Connor, not with grief particularly, with the particular clarity of someone who had examined a position thoroughly and closed it out. He was still there, somewhere in the city, living the careful life of his constructed persona, finding the next person who would show him what to be. She thought about the fourth date, the open window of herself she'd offered, the extraordinary accuracy with which he'd moved through it and positioned himself as what she'd been waiting for. She thought about what Dr. Shaw had said. The projection was real. The need was real. The love was real as an experience. She had been in love. She had not been wrong to feel it. She had also not been wrong to look more closely. She was someone who looked more closely. That was, as it turned out, not a liability. It was the thing that had gotten her out. She pulled on her coat, gathered her bag, switched off the desk lamp. In the elevator, she thought about the motif she'd been carrying for months. The phrase she'd said to Nadia with a smile in October. The phrase she'd turned over in her mind at the bookstore, in the restaurant, in Dr. Shaw's office. He said exactly what I'd always wanted to hear. She thought that was true. He'd said every word of it with precision and consistency and warmth. The question was not whether the words were right. The question was, who had been saying them? The lobby doors opened to the December cold. She stepped out. The air was sharp and honest. The pavement was wet and bright with the reflected lights of the city. She started walking. She wasn't looking for a particular thing to hear. She was listening instead for something quieter, something that didn't know her blueprint in advance, something that would say the wrong thing sometimes and mean it. A stranger's voice on that particular frequency, the frequency of someone who was actually there. She had time. For the first time in a long time, that felt like enough.